Ohio State introduced Ross Bjork as the 9th athletic director in program history, succeeding Gene Smith, who's been here for 19 years and was here today to help introduce the soon-to-be former Texas A&M AD as the new leader of this athletic program. And today was a day for Ross Bjork. He says he's not going to really start. We're going to see him more after March 1st. Doesn't technically start until July 1st. He and Gene Smith are going to be sort of collaborating over these next 6 months. But Ross Bjork today was able to sort of begin to lay out what his vision is for what Ohio State athletics will look like once he arrives. He brings a dozen years, the last 12 years anyway, of background from SEC programs, both Ole Miss and Texas A&M, and it's going to be interesting to watch that background sort of mix in with what is a very different culture here at Ohio State. Stephen, I guess maybe anything that jumped out to you from today about the vision he's laying out and what you expect this to look like when he's in charge.
He wants to be aggressive, maybe, is a good way to put this with everything. Whether you're talking just fundraising in general for the athletic department, Ohio State University's athletic department, NIL spaces. He made it a point to say, I'm a football guy multiple times. And he wasn't just saying it as like hey, I played football, I'm a football guy. No, like, football is king. All these other things are cool. I think him and President Carter both got asked about the fact that Ohio State has 36 Division I varsity sports. And both of them said this intention to hold on to all those. But Bjork was like, football's still king. That's the revenue driver here. And the way he talked about things was, I joked about this. We got done talking with him both off to the side in the press conference. He might SEC some things up in here. And let's see if it works, obviously, because this is a different culture up here. It's a different group of boosters that maybe think about things and go about things a different way. So there are things where it feels like I can see what he wants to do here. I'm just not sure yet if it's going to work yet. And it's not all going to be things that are in his control.
I think he literally said football is king. I think that was actually the phrase that came out of his mouth. And one thing he said today that I thought was interesting, I don't know if it hit your guys' ears the same way. He was talking about the difference between championship programs and fighters. And we think of Texas A&M, I think, in terms of like the scope that they are, the size that they are, how much money they're able to spend. My God, what they just spent to fire Jimbo Fisher. Like, this is a well-funded, big SEC athletic program, and he referred to Texas A&M as maybe we were more of like the fighter class. And to me, that went off in my head that like he sees Ohio State as elite of the elite. Like, he gets that already. And I think that is maybe informing some of what Steven's talking about, where before it was like maybe there are legitimate excuses why you can't do X, Y, or Z. And here, there are no excuses. There are no reasons why long-term you shouldn't be champion of the champions in a number of ways.
Well, my biggest takeaway was that he said that he wants Ryan Day to add a fullback and run a couple of fullback traps. So I'm looking forward to that personally. I think that's going to be very exciting. But to kind of build on what you were saying, as Steven asked this question when we were kind of off to the side, you asked, what are your expectations for football and for men's basketball? And to go with what Steven was saying about being aggressive, it was, we want these two programs to contend for national championships. And with the football program, he specifically mentioned, if you lose on a last-second field goal or you lose on a last-second play, and he brought up the Georgia game, and he was like, how differently are we talking about all of this if that field goal goes in? And that's something that we have talked about. That's something that the fans have talked about. So that's the barometer for success, right? That's the barometer, and I think it goes back to what he was saying about the elite class and kind of the fighter class, whereas you have the champions and kind of the haves and the have-nots, basically, is what he's saying. You have people who want to get into the club and people who are in the club. And when you are in the club, that's the expectation. And, of course, there's going to be some caveats. Of course there's going to be something. You run into a super team in Georgia who's 14-0 in the college football semifinals, and you lose another great game. You're not going to look at the program the same way that you would. You lose to Michigan and you don't make the college football playoff. That, to me, is kind of the bar. You look at it as something's going to be unacceptable, something's going to be acceptable. And, yeah, he's not going to fire somebody if they don't win a championship every year, but that's the goal. And for men's basketball, he was obviously a little less effusive in his praise of that program. But, I think that's kind of where we're at, and it's going to be aggressive, I think, to Steven's point.
Yeah, I don't necessarily hear a difference in terms of, Gene Smith would say all those same things, that this needs to be a program that's winning national championships. He talked about the basketball program that way when he hired Chris Holtman. He certainly talks about the football program that way. So I don't know that that's necessarily a change in mindset. What I think is really interesting, because a lot of people when Gene first announced his retirement, immediately there was like 8 names that come to mind of proteges that he's put out there into the world to be his successor. And Ohio State went with somebody different because I think there was a recognition of here's where we are, but what's coming next. And there were a lot of conversations today about the future of the NCAA, the future of Power 5 and autonomy, and those conferences may be breaking off. And Bjork is very interested in that happening, I think, as soon as possible from the way he talked today. Like, he thinks that is the most common sense, best future for all these programs. And I think he's going to, there were some areas where Gene was, I think, a little bit uncomfortable with what was going to come next. And I don't think he is. I think he is maybe going to aggressively push Ohio State to be the leader of whatever comes next, but they're still figuring out what that is, and he'll bring a new perspective to it. We're going to talk a lot more about this on Buckeye Talk. Get that wherever you can find podcasts, and get the text 614-350-3315. Everything that Bjork and Ted Carter and Gene Smith were saying today at the Covelli Center was going straight to your phone from cleveland.com.